Well, welcome back once again to Talking with Tech. This is Luke Stuber, joined as always by Chris Begay. How are you, sir?
Oh, today I am fantastic, Lucas. You want to know why?
Why?
Because it's summer break and I had to play. We were playing Ticket to Ride with my kids and Dad won. Dad crushed it, killed them. Sorry, kids. You lose, I win. Ticket to Ride. Ticket
to Ride's that can be a pretty advanced game. So good job. You learned the rules. How was now you just came back from ISTE, right? I did. I just got back at like midnight last night, so I'm still a little bit punch drunk, so even more rewarding for winning that game because Dad is a little loopy. Fantastic. And then we have West Coast Rachel. How are you?
I'm doing good here on the West Coast. You guys have to fill me in. I have no idea what game you're talking about. I'm so out of it.
Oh, well, Ticket to Ride is a board game that you make the longest train possible, or you make connections between cities, and you have these cards, and it's really accessible to different ages because, you have these little tokens, these little train tokens. So wait, we should introduce Midwest Rachel because it looks like she was giving a thumbs up. She plays Ticket to Ride too, right? So, okay.
I do. This is Rachel Langley. I'm in Michigan right now, not to be confused with West Coast Rachel, but we love Ticket to Ride. I have 3 kiddos, and even my youngest for a couple of years has played along. We kind of consider her our natural built-in handicap. The first couple of years she'd play because she doesn't have kind of the strategy. Other people are like, okay, I'm trying to get from here to here, and you might want to try to block somebody. She's just like, I like the pink ones, and I like, so then you have to work around her to make your route complete. But it's pretty fun. I agree that all ages can play. They'll just play with a different level of strategy.
I love that all the comments are that all ages can play, and my comment was that game is hard. I'm not sure what that says about me, but I think it's hard. So, well, Rachel, Rachel Langley, we're so pleased to be joined by you today. I mean, you're somebody that I always sort of seeing online, and we tend to interact with a lot of the same people, and I always love to see everything that you create. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thanks, and thanks for having me. I'm a speech language pathologist in Michigan. I graduated with my master's in 2002 from Michigan State and stayed in the area. I work in Eaton County, which is near Michigan State and near the capital, Lansing, in Michigan, but it's pretty rural. We have a couple of schools we'd consider pretty suburban, but we also have some pretty out there districts that takes me on the road a lot of travel, not heavily populated, but enough room to drive and spread out and stuff like that. So in the past, for the first 10 or 12 years, I worked in a more traditional speech language pathologist role and tended over time, got shifted more and more. So started with a lot of early childhood kiddos and ended with a lot of students in categorical programs, which here in Michigan, we often call cognitively impaired, or they fall under either mild or moderate cognitive impairment. And a lot of those students have complex communication needs. So I kind of fell into a role of trying to figure out other tools to help them communicate between things that were already happening in the classroom and things we could implement additionally. And if you know anything about that traditional speech pathology role in the schools, there just isn't a lot of time allocated to come up with a lot of strategies and a lot of tools and things like that. And so when our county created a role for an AAC specialist about 5 years ago, I fell into that role and happily took on that seat of saying, okay, now I can go back to my colleagues that I've worked alongside and support them with more intentional supports for AAC. Our county has an assistive technology consultant, and then we try to help folks understand how our roles sometimes overlap, but sometimes are very distinct, and that if there's a communication need, that's where I'm called in to come alongside and support the team. So I've done that for about the past 5 years, and when I first started, I've worked with kids with complex needs a lot, but I'd only knew those kids and the classrooms and populations that I knew. A lot of students on the autism spectrum too, but it was a shift to go into that county-wide. Now I'm traveling everywhere to all the programs and all the ages. And so I admit that first year, it definitely felt like I was flying the plane while it was still being built, because I knew I had a lot to learn, but I knew I needed to be a resource to my colleagues out there. So that's how I kind of came into this role and really turned to social media and online to learn as much as I could from a lot of people smarter than me to find the resources and where I needed to go. So
Yeah. Hey, Rachel. So I would have to say that is kind of a similar role that I play in my school district, is that we don't have necessarily at this point a specific AAC specialist that goes in and coaches, but we have an AT team that still wears both hats, But I think the way you describe it is very similar to, I think, many people maybe that are listening that work as kind of a coach to the people who are doing the actual implementation. So is that like your job title? Do you call it coach, or do you think of yourself as coach, or what does that mean to you?
Well, I feel like I'm kind of stuck between two roles where we are not a big county. We're pretty rural. And so a lot of our districts that are pretty small kind of want and expect that expert model. Like they want to dial the phone and have the expert come out, tell them what to do and tell them, provide the equipment and set things up. Whereas we know that even as one person in that role across one county, you can burn out real quick in that expert model. And so from day one, I'm thankful I had other people on the team to shape that vision to say, we got to teach them to fish. We can't keep doing this. The expert model isn't sustainable. And so we've really had that sustainability in mind, even in our relatively small rural-ish area, suburban area, where we've tried to identify folks who work with, most intense communication needs and bring the training to them and say, I can come and show you, but I want to show you with that sustainability in mind. So you can't wait for me to drive 80 miles out to you again to come and program something. I'm going to teach you how to program this. And then you have that ability locally. So I have that vision in mind. And I know that's our goal, to build to that coaching model. But I also recognize we are relatively small. I mean, I have a lot of people who would do what I do, even in the state, and they're in such densely populated areas where they can't be pulled into that expert model. But I still kind of have that expectation put on me. We're not a giant area. And there are only a handful of people that even know what a Toby is in my county, right? So that's always the vision. But I don't really call myself a coach. That's how I approach it as I come in. But I'm straddling both of those roles, if that makes sense.
I've had a similar experience. I was an AAC specialist in very rural parts of Oregon and Washington, and had a similar deal where it's like, well, it's a 30-minute or hour drive to get to this district, and they've got maybe an elementary, a middle, or maybe two elementaries, a middle, and a high school, right? And they've got 6 kids that are on devices, and it's like, I'm not going to see you again for 3 months, So how do I best allocate my time? But then part of it too was, really it comes down to this like almost teaching the teacher piece, right? Like, or coaching the coach. I don't know how to put that. But, teaching people how to find resources on their own as well. I guess one of the questions I have is, seeing you so much on social media, like where do you look? Like where should people be looking, I guess, for good resources?
Well, again, in that first year of doing it, I really felt like I needed ideas to pass along that were practical and easy to apply. And so I really appreciated Practical AAC and Carol Zangary's work to put together a real clearinghouse of other resources. And so I feel like that was a real place to start, where if you've ever been to that website, you can fall down some rabbit holes and, I want to look at assessment. I want to look at the work, Vicki Clark's work, and next thing you know, you spent an hour and you didn't go look for what you were looking for. But that was definitely kind of a starting point for me to understand what other resources are out there. I feel like after that first year, which was just a lot, it was a lot. It was a lot of, I won't say chaos, but establishing what the role was, and really going from an almost zero knowledge base in our county of what AAC means and what that is, and that it's not a special sometimes thing that we do, but this is a need and an obligation for us to provide to our students, and trying to get that culture shift going. After that, I realized, okay, I need to be a little more focused and look for strong research-based. I didn't want to just be sharing anything, both with my teachers and speech paths that I work with, but also I created a Facebook page and was just sharing things as I found them, and thought, okay, you can't just share anything that you find. You gotta know what it is. And so putting a filter on that and really looking for where is that from and what's the research base on that, I feel like has been helpful. Perhaps narrowed some of my resources and my views in a way, but also I think just refined it too and made it better. We really like Project Core and the work out of UNC Chapel Hill's Center for Literacy and Disability Studies. There's been a lot of that here in the state of Michigan. They've really taken that there's such a history here already where some of that has been put into place for a long time, but really just to know the quality and the research behind the work and the resources we share. So,
Rachel, that reminds me of that famous quote by Abraham Lincoln. Don't believe everything you've read on the internet. Remember that quote?
Yeah.
Or here on a podcast, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I mean, you just bring up a really good point that there's a lot of information out there. It doesn't mean because it's information that it's good information. And so you really have to verify your source, and you have to be a good digital citizen and make sure before you go off and share it or believe it that you find the research behind it. You know, and that's a good lesson for us adults, and it's even better for the next generation coming up.
So one thing that, because we spoke to Carol Zingari recently too. In fact, by the time you're listening to this, people, it should be up if you want to listen to that. And one thing that she came back to a number of times was encouraging SLPs just to put themselves out there more, you know, and that's something that you've certainly done. For the folks out there listening, like, do you have any words of advice in that regard? Like, where would they start?
Start somewhere. And that was kind of how I felt, where I didn't have somebody in my county or even in a neighboring county who had done an AAC specialist role. There were pockets of Michigan that had really been focused on it for a while, but it wasn't in my area. I had taken an AAC elective in grad school, and it was taught by a phenomenally brilliant man whose focus was on the computer and technologies that were, you know, emerging in the 80s, you know, not versus the language and the software that we are a lot focused on now. You know, now that tablet technology and things are here and the technology is more accessible, now we're back to talking and focusing more on the language and the programming. And so I had to start somewhere, and I really tried to connect with people that I heard at trainings. I would go, you know, I went to Closing the Gap and I went to ATIA, and I sought out kind of conversations. I really tried not to be a creepy stalker, but, you know, going up after the talk and saying, hey, this is what I do and this is where I am. And really it came from the first year, and I have to credit my AT colleague, Robin Pegg, for having the vision to say, you know, this is your first year in this role, but I think there's a real need in Michigan to have an AAC conference. And I was like, oh, would that be for me to attend? Because I'm new here. And she's like, that's cute. But we need, again, in that building capacity model, we need to be able to offer a source of information that we can draw our people to instead of going out over and over and saying the same thing. And so we created what has now become Talking AAC. And talk about putting yourself out there. That's way outside my comfort zone. Robin and I, in a partnership of AT and AAC, work together closely. We're kind of yin and yang, because she's like, let's do it. And I'm the cautious, like, but what if something goes wrong? And so in that collaboration, we've really fostered some great stuff. And the Talking AAC conference is in its 5th year. And that's how we got there. Talk about stepping out. We love for people to come, but we can also say, if you see that similar need in your area of, gosh, you know, over here in this pocket of our country, it's hard for my people to travel to Closing the Gap and to travel to ATIA or to travel to AAC in the desert or one of those more regional, then you know what? Find a collaborative team that shares your vision and has the same goals for quality practice and that capacity building model, and just start. You know, it might not be perfect, as some speech people often want it to be when you start, but you start and you build it and you refine it, and good things can happen. So
what an awesome message. I just love what you just said so much, that, you know, if you can't make it to those big conferences, if you can't do it, it's on you then to make it work for your area. You know, you owned it, you know? So tell us, I'm really interested in more about this conference now. How did you build it, and what does it look like? Is it a day-long conference? Do people come to sessions? How do you split it up? Like, what does that professional development look like?
Yeah, well, the first 2 years, we were able to host it at our local educational agency, which has some conference space. And I think the first year it was 1 day. In the second year, it was 2 days. And there were breakout sessions throughout the day with 3 or 4 strands, even from the get-go. And we really tried to find a balance of some kind of introductory topics, some topics for people that had some information already about AAC and needed to advance and refine their understanding and their practice. Made sure there were topics on some assessment or positioning, and just trying to find kind of a nice mixture of topics. But really that first year, it was relying a lot on our friends and folks we knew here in Michigan who had been doing this already. Again, there's a very well-established team out of Oakland County, Michigan, that's been doing a core vocabulary and universal core project for years, decades. And so from there, again, it was going to conferences and saying, hey, Lauren Enders and Kata Hearn, and kind of introducing yourself and developing relationships with folks that you've said, okay, I've seen you present or I've heard you talk. Could you bring this topic and come and join us? And kind of snowballing from there. So the past 2 years, we've had to host it offsite at Michigan State University. We have a beautiful facility at the Kellogg Hotel and Conference Center on the campus of MSU. And it's stretched. So it's 2 days of topics with a pre-conference day. So you can have one topic all day long. There's usually 3 topics to pick from. Last year, we had Dr. Kieran Erickson as one of our pre-conference sessions. We had Kata Hearn as one of our pre-conference sessions. And then we had Meredith Hankins, who is from what used to be UCP in Alabama and Birmingham, and now it's called United Ability. But they're a really LAMP intensive program down there. And so, again, we're trying to find a variety. And that was what we had last year for pre-con. And we were honored to have 2 amazing keynote speakers last year. We had Karen Owens from We Speak Pod came and presented one of our keynote presentations. And again, we want those keynotes to really bring the why. We can have a lot of the technical talks throughout the day about what is core and how do you implement it and how do we get AAC embedded throughout the day. But we really tried to start the conference with the why message in the keynote. So Karen Owens was our first day keynote. And then Erin Polk from the Page Creeds world. She's actually has a background as a BCBA and a parent of a child with ASD and some very complex medical needs. Sadly, Creed has passed away. About 2 years ago, he passed away, but he had such pain and things he couldn't explain that manifested as a lot of behavior. And people would tell her he can't do this, give him one button or give him a couple pictures, but he can't do this, he'll break it. And so she brought a powerful message too of saying there is no such thing as too behavioral, he's too aggressive. Don't give him AAC. That's exactly why he needs it. He needs to be able to tell us about the nature and severity of his pain and how we can help him. And she shares videos. And if you look her up online, she has hundreds of videos that she recorded through her time of working with him and giving him access to a vocabulary. So that was our conference last year. We're already rolling. It seems like we barely kind of take a breath and roll into next year. This fall, we have another amazing lineup. Dr. David Copenhaver is coming. Dr. Erickson's kind of partner in the literacy collaboration there to do another pre-conference. John Halloran's doing a pre-conference for us this year. And Kelly Key and Deidre Dabbles are doing a pre-con for us this year. So we're really excited. It's been, we try to build things that we want to see, right? You invite people you want to hear from. So
you're giving me a list of people I think we have about half of them on the podcast already. We got to get the rest.
Yeah.
The other half is on the list to get.
Exactly.
Sure.
I have another quick question about this conference because I'm interested in it, and I like how you're kind of inspiring other people to make one themselves. Do the attendees, first of all, what day of the week's ours is, like a Friday and a Saturday or a Thursday, Friday? Are you expecting people to take a day off work or get professional leave? That's question number 1. And question number 2 is, where does the funding come from? Do people pay to come there, or do you beg, borrow, and steal do you get grants? Like how do you pay these people to come in?
Yeah. Okay. Well, it started Friday and has backed up through the week, and then it was Thursday, Friday, and now the pre-con is on Wednesday. So it's Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. We're a nonprofit. We in the past had partnered with one of our AT groups here in the state of Michigan to help just kind of run registration and put it on. But now my Eaton Risa is who I work for, and we fully run registration. It's not for profit, so we keep costs pretty low. That we're just trying to cover our expenses since moving to the Kellogg Center. Obviously, that's more than holding it in-house. So we do charge for registration. However, it's relatively low. I mean, I think right now this year, it's $100 for pre-conference and $125 for the other 2 days. So, I mean,
that's really low.
Yeah. I mean, we're not trying to make money, we're just trying to cover our costs. So we don't have any grants. And to be quite honest, a lot of the work comes after hours. that it's myself and a couple other people we are the whole committee, and we have a 9-to-5 job, or 8-to-4 or whatever. We have a job where we're running all day trying to support teams and kids. And so there might be little pockets of time where we get to talk about it, but the majority of this and making promotional stuff and all that just happens in spare time because it's something we really believe in. And I think there's been a benefit. So
yeah, it sounds like a podcast. I know. You have a passion for it, so you find the time and you do it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So bringing two things together that you said, you made the comment about how you want the keynote speakers to bring the why. And then when we were talking at the very beginning, also, you were talking about sort of bringing an AAC culture into schools, right? So I'm thinking about listeners that might be, thinking about the concept of like planning an in-service, right? Or trying to do that inspirational piece. Like, how do we do that in an hour, right? Is that what we do on the pod? How do we bring the why and the practical?
Well, I think part of your podcast is that it's an ongoing conversation, right? Week to week. I don't know that you can do it in 1 hour, but you're threading a lot of that through your conversations. I think always trying to have the users, our end users, and our students, or I don't know how you want to say it, those individuals' complex communication needs in mind. I think one of the things that startled me the most, I guess, shifting from a traditional speech role to a consultant mode, is that I went to a lot more meetings where there were a lot more people around the table, but oftentimes parents were pretty, I don't want to say combative, but it was a lot more on alert, and I just realized I'm not taking this personally. These are parents who feel that much more stress about advocating for their child who does not yet have independent communication. I've sent off my own kids to school, and I have a child with some special needs who doesn't always come home and tell me everything that happens at school, and I have to find out other ways, and that can cause a different kind of stress in your life. So understanding that that's not something personal, but it's something we can come alongside and say, I get that this is stressful. Let's work on this together and make it collaborative. I don't know. I think it's a lot of conversations. I definitely don't think I have it figured out yet. Can we make just that clear that I'm just trying. I'm just an SLP trying to bring forth the good message of AAC to the people. So,
Rachel, I have a question to put a hat on both hats of both to the conference, someone who's putting a conference together and your specialist role. Do you find the people that you work with the most and the people that attend the conference the most are speech therapists, or is it starting to change where you're working more with classroom teachers, occupational therapists? I mean, is your clientele changing?
I think it has really shifted over the past few years of having the conference, where it was pretty speech focused in the beginning. And now we're getting a lot more teams where people are like, maybe the speech person came the first year and then they brought back their teacher, and now they're bringing their teacher, their ASD consultant, and their OT, and so it's groups of people, which I think is powerful because we run 4 concurrent strands. So, and we build a great schedule, I have to say, because there's times I think, I don't know what I would go to at the 10 o'clock slot, So if you can have a team of people and you're all hearing different things and can come back together, it's that much more you can take away and bring back to your district and to your classroom and to your kids. So it really has been a mix in these past couple of years.
And do you see that too in your role as the specialist?
Yeah, I mean, I would say mostly I'm working with teachers and SLPs, but I do have a lot of, there's one of my districts I work in where 2 of the OTs have brought quite a few referrals to me. And some of that is recognizing similarities in other students that we have shared in the past. And yet someone from this other team hasn't yet brought it up to say, well, what about AAC? And so the OT goes, hey, if they need it, this kid certainly, you need to come along and let's do a consultation and start talking about the student. So I think there's even more of a mix at the conference right now, but I do see that broadening out in the consultant work too.
Rachel, I have a question for you. First of all, I just love that there's another Rachel on the podcast. But you've been talking a lot about your role, and I just think your insight is really, really wonderful. And I'm wondering what you find the biggest roadblock is. Because you're doing a lot of, consulting and trying to empower teams and, teach them a lot of information. What's the biggest roadblock that you're finding in that role?
Oh, I think the hardest thing is when you put a lot of time and effort into training and you come back for a revisit and nothing has happened, to know that you thought, I try not to have empty conversations. I hope that they're back and forth and that I'm being responsive, but then to then feel like you're starting over again and say, okay, well, I see that didn't really work. So what else can I do to better support? Do we have to break it down even a little more? And, I get that it's just AAC can be so intimidating to some of our classroom staff. It looks different. It just seems like more work. And so that's still the number one. I can have all the tips and tricks and small little lists or whatever, but for some folks, it's just hard to break through that. How do we get started?
Yeah. And I find the same thing. It's like, it's kind of just so disheartening, right? We have all this information. We're just really excited. And then, we come back and it's not being implemented. And, I think that's the biggest roadblock. One thing that I find really helpful is just trying to really listen to a teacher or an SLP, and try to figure out, how can I help this classroom function better? How can I help in a general sense, because I think a lot of times these teachers are so busy and it's like we come in and they're like, not one more thing. Like, I can't do one more thing. And so how can we empower them and inspire them to do one more thing? Because eventually one more thing leads to a lot more things. But I think that just getting that buy-in it's such a challenge sometimes in the beginning. And I think one of the ways to do that is just to have a real conversation and kind of, I feel like that's a theme through this podcast that I've heard from you is, when you wanted to get some speakers for the conference, you started a conversation. When you wanted to just learn more about AAC in general, you started a conversation after a presentation. And I think it's so important to have those conversations. Yeah.
I mean, I've started to walk away from certain classrooms sometimes and think, well, I think that went well, but I need to check back. Maybe I can't wait 2 weeks to circle back around here. Maybe I need more frequency, but that's just the biggest roadblock is getting that traction to get going. And I know one of those things that can help is spending more time there and modeling, where I try to kind of share that role. I don't carry a direct caseload. So there is I always say, you have your local communication expert and that's your SLP. I'm here to coach you all and support you and bring you pieces you don't have and help you understand. But I really try to keep teachers from going around their SLP to me to say, no, you're all here. Let me do it with you. We can coach together. I can model with you. But just finding those ways to get around that hurdle of this is hard, And I think that's why I'm sharing ideas and why I turn to social media to look for other people's ideas, because I think a lot of the difficulties we share kind of boil down to that.
And one thing I love about all of the things that you create is that it's really easy and it's super visual. We've talked about this before. I just love a powerful visual, and you have such great visuals on your site. I just love, there's one that I always share when I present. It's the wallpaper for the iPad. It says something like this is a communication device. What a genius idea. We'll add that to the Facebook group so everyone can see what I'm talking about. But I just that's so powerful, so simple, but so powerful.
Thank you. I try to find ideas that are like the work smarter, not harder. Yes. Where I don't ever want someone to say, well, I didn't know how to get in touch with you. You know what? I don't think I put it on the public one, but I just put my number, my email, my name right on that screensaver. So if you see that, you have a way to get in touch with me. If you have a question, it's not working right. But it says this iPad is used for communication. Please open the communication app and put it in guided access, because that alone will solve about half of our problems, right? If next time I come, it doesn't have 800 selfies of the student because it was out of guided access, or, just a reminder, another way to just give a gentle reminder.
They'll use the icon editor to take the selfies in the app, depending on the student.
Yeah, they find ways.
What are some other visuals that you've shared that you think people have resonated with?
One of the first ones that I made, because I did pod training early too, about a month after I took the consultant role. We had a pod training here in Michigan with Linda Burkhart. And then the next summer we had Gail Porter come. And so I was like, whoa, that was some of the most early really intense training that I got since being in this role. And one, if you not familiar with POD is very much a language immersion, to say we cannot expect our students to see a device used for 20 minutes, 3 times a week or twice a week, and think that they're just going to run with it. In order to have true fluency and understanding of that device, they have to be immersed in it all day. And so I shared a statistic from the Quiet listserv, Jane Workston.
Yes, that's exactly it. Because I share that in my presentations. I'm like, yes, that's exactly what it is.
And it reminds us that those typically developing kids, we give easily 18 months of, we talk to them without expecting them to be fluent back with us. We don't stop after 6 months and go, well, they're not going to talk. We know it's going to come. They need time to build those connections, the motor skill, the language skill. And so that's the graphic. It's actually a picture of my middle child, who's now 10, as a baby. She's probably 9 months old in the picture, but it says, if we give them time, if we only model for AAC users that 20 minutes twice a week, it will take 80 years or whatever it says too.
I can read it. I have it right in front of me.
Oh,
this is a famous visual. This is the big deal.
It really is. By 18 months, babies have heard 4,380 hours of spoken language, and we don't expect them to be fluent speakers yet. If AAC learners only see symbols modeled for communication twice weekly for 20 to 30 minutes, it will take 84 years for them to have the same exposure to aided language as an 18-month-old has to spoken language. So powerful.
And what I, as a SLP, what I felt in that when I saw that was kind of that urgency to remind us we need to be doing this more. What I did not expect was people like Dana Nieder chimed in and said, when I first saw that graphic, it knocked the wind out of me, and it kind of broke me, because I realized, it was just a heavier burden. I think I didn't intend to put that on families, but just knowing the enormity of that, and how truly, if I'm a parent, I'm sending my child off, 6-7 hours a day to a school where I don't have control over their time and their modeling and how much they're being, supported. And so that was Dana's take on it. And that was kind of an unintended, but I really thought it would just add some of that urgency of, remember, it's not just the SLP. It's the same piece that really I like about Project Core. It wasn't designed for SLPs. They have a Core 36 universal board. It's designed for teachers to say, if you have a classroom of, Karen Erickson said this, I just saw her again in March, and she said, if you have a classroom of kids with complex needs and only some of them are supported and you can't find the means to, here, start with these 36. It's supposed to be simple enough that you can just go. So I don't know. That's that thread that I like, where it can't all hinge on SLPs. We need, obviously, I'm a speech path and you guys are speech paths, and that I have great respect for the work that we do, but we also need to not only, the responsibility doesn't stop with us, right?
Yeah, we're all in this together. It's not just on any one profession's shoulder. It's that interprofessional piece and bringing in the families.
Yep.
I'm sorry. My wind is knocked out. But it's, for me, that quote, it hits me, but it's inspirational for me. Right. And part of it is because when I'm sitting there now, like doing modeling, right, of these things, like I always criticize myself afterwards, right? Like I think I should have done this some other way, or I should have gotten more repetitions in, or whatever. But then I think about the way that I talk around children, like typically developing children. I realize I'm saying all kinds of dumb stuff all the time, and I'm not providing perfect input constantly. And, of course, so every little bit is meaningful. Even if, it just goes back to just put yourself out there, just start doing it, just model.
I was just going to say, Lucas, you bring up a really great point, because I think that a lot of the caregivers and professionals that I work with, they just feel like they're doing it wrong, or they're going to do it wrong. And then that shuts it down, right? It shuts it down before it even starts. And I just really try to impress that, aside from a couple things that I probably wouldn't do, just do it. Just kind of forge through and model, and just give those exposures to language, because that's how children are going to learn how to use it.
For sure. That's, I think, the bulk of, I am clearly a visual person, and perhaps that was why I'm drawn more to AAC, but in creating visuals. I'm trying to make a big concept simple. I'm just trying to make it less intimidating. We can get into a lot of what does modeling mean to you versus what does modeling mean to you? My behaviorist wants me to say it and then you to say it. That's modeling to them. And we can have a lot of those conversations. And sometimes I think we as speech language pathologists can get very technical about some of our terms, especially in this field. But at the heart of it, we need to have something simple we can point to. And that's what I try to make with graphics that I think make sense to me. And sometimes I have a small group of people around the country I'll shoot one off to and say, does this make sense to you? Or is it just me? Because this makes sense to me, but I'm thinking of it this way. And because I'm not sure, but that's my goal, is to make a big concept simple so that maybe it can be a launching point for that conversation. Well, this is what modeling means, but my sign is just going to say model, model, model all day long or whatever,
Rachel, another little subtext that I think I want to bring forward so that everyone listening has this in the back of their heads, and maybe now in the front of their heads, is the idea that you then share it. Like, you created it and then you share, and you lead with sharing. Lead with the idea that what I just created isn't just for me, but because we're not just here in Michigan and in the schools I serve working together, but I got to put this out to the rest of the world so that then it'll come back to me when someone else creates something, and we just have this massive circle. Is that how it works for you? That you just think, well, I got to share?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not trying to there is no private knowledge, I mean, I'm really, puts me in the expert hole again, right? Well, go ask Rachel. She might have a graphic she can tell you about. No. I mean, I'll share a graphic, but I hope you understand the background behind it and that you can explain it to your people, because it's all about building capacity. And if it can positively move forward our field of AAC, which can be this little niche field, and make it more understandable and more approachable, hopefully we can get around that barrier of, I'm not doing that, I can't do that. No, we're just going to break it down and make it small and understandable and go bit by bit, walk this road together. So
I have a nickname for you, Rachel. I'll call you Remix Rachel. Remix Rachel.
All right, I'll take it.
You have your own stuff that you come up with, but then when you learn someone else's, and you're like, I gotta remix that and make it a little bit more digestible for other people. So
yeah, well, it's true though. I don't know that I'm a great detailed note taker. I try to listen to and process something, but then think, how much do we walk away from full sessions with like pages and pages of notes? Even when we go to professional development, you're usually looking for, what am I going to walk away with and use? Right. And those are those like nuggets that I try to grab, or sometimes somebody will say something, I'll write it down and come back to it later and think, I think other people could benefit from that, and I'm not trying to keep that private knowledge to myself. I'm trying to share it out. So
that's great. Well, and I always hate making a resource thinking it's only going to be used once anyway. Why not repurpose these things? Chris, you've done a lot of the same with writing books and these things. And I mean, that's great to share out. Rachel, you produce a lot of materials. I might actually be the least material friendly person here. I just realized, and I'm giving advice. I better make some stuff.
And I think the other thing about putting yourself out there is, I'm more of a cautious person, maybe a little bit anxious, but once you start putting yourself out there, you might have 99 people who love it, but you're gonna have somebody who's like, that's bad, that's terrible. Here's my reference of why that's wrong. And that's probably the number one thing that happened to me taking a consultancy role, is I got a lot thicker skin so that I wasn't so easily deflated by, a bad comment or a criticism. That's okay. I mean, we don't all have to think the same. Even in our field of AAC, it's a broad field with a lot of different perspectives. I'm just going to take in the ideas that I hear that are meaningful and I think quality and share them back, but I'm not forcing anybody to believe them. So
great. I remember my heart pounding so hard the first time that I ever gave a presentation or something like that. I mean, really, I remember this specifically. And now it really doesn't. I really don't and I don't mean this as just like a platitude, but I actually really do enjoy the critical feedback, because it makes me then think about how to improve, right, for next time. I gave a talk yesterday to this AAC in the cloud, and it went very badly. Honestly, we had huge technical problems, and what it's going to make me do is figure out how to do that better next time. So
yeah,
hopefully it was useful. If anyone's listening, watch that. Sorry.
I think you're being a little hard on yourself. I saw your session, thought it went just great, but
good. See, that's actually why I said all that. I just wanted the praise.
nobody who works in AAC is perfect. And it continues to evolve and move. And as the technology changes and as more research comes out, so you can't know it all, but you can still go out there and lead with the idea that you can learn more.
If we waited for the perfect time to start, we'd never start, right? So just do it. I want to ask you, since we're talking about the sort of step-by-step piece, in terms of taking away one nugget, I think we've given a few of them, but I also wanted to ask you about the core word a day calendar piece that you've done, because I really enjoyed that resource. I think we all did.
Yeah. So that was Remix, Rachel. That was not a project I created. That was reaching out to Carols and Gary to say, hey, you put together these amazing resources. If there's something I can do to help, I like making graphics and things, and having that kind of conversation, knowing my strength is not in, especially at that time, dictating to people which words we were going to focus on per month, but it was in making it accessible, and that I can do board maker and things like that in my sleep, that I've just done it so much. So they had already established a year of core as a project on the website, and then another year of core where each month they identified, I believe, 12 words. So it was 144 words the first year, and again the second year. And so the lists already existed, and there was already some materials made, but they were cycling through them again. And in coming through those word lists again, they were looking for ideas to say, can you think of other ways we can encourage people, families, teachers to access and use these words and not be intimidated to just look at a word list and say that's a lot of words. So I did. I just sat in front of a calendar, and I love books and literacy. I come from a pretty rich literacy background in my family of teachers and educators and research folks and reading. And so always trying to weave books and texts that are core rich. And I mean, shoot, any book is core rich for young kids, but just encouraging simple ideas to say, you could go to the library and check out these 4 books and talk through these core words on one day a week, and just giving just general ideas, examples. Really, it's not really prescriptive, right? But just generating ideas on other ways to embed core throughout your daily activities. So that's the Project Core calendars, which I did for, I think, 24 months, usually at about 10 o'clock at night until we made it through the 2 years of core. And I've been in some conversation to do something else, but I'm not sure what that would look like quite yet. If you have an idea you want to kick my way. Sometimes all the hats I wear just get to be a little much, and that creative hat kind of went to the side on the calendars for a bit. So
how do people access those if people are hearing about those for the first time?
Where can we find you?
Yep, those are all hosted through the Practical AAC website. Each month, a few days before the first of the month, Carols and Gary creates a brand new post to say these are resources for July. I think she already shared out a July post because it's just around the corner here. And she has some new things that she has made or people have contributed, but I believe the links to that are included month by month, or you could just go to the Practical AAC website and search under a year of core words or core word calendars, and they pop right up.
Well, and how do people find you?
Yeah, I'm on Facebook mostly. I have a page there, Rachel Langley, AAC Specialist, and I try to share all my work there too as well. That's my primary kind of sharing spot. I dabble in Twitter. I have tried a little Instagram. I can't do too many things. I have 3 little kids and a puppy right now. So I pick one thing and go with it. But so it's mostly there through that Facebook page.
Great.
I think I've seen you in Facebook groups too, right? I mean, you frequent other Facebook. Is there Facebook groups that you kind of, pop into?
Yeah, there are probably too many groups I belong to. It's part of keeping the pulse on that conversation to know kind of where trends in the field are going or when releases or updates of things are happening. I learn a lot from Facebook groups. I think their power is in that resource sharing, like we've talked about. I try to caution folks that there are a couple groups that it feels like if I were an SLP that just had a traditional language or TIC caseload and I had that one AAC kid, I'm going to come to this group and I'm going to write a case study for these people and say, I have this kid, this is what they look like, this is what they sound like, what should I give them? And that is not, to me, the ideal way to be using a social media group. It's kind of like the WebMD for my, I have gangrene and I'm going to go online and check it out or whatever. I'm going to, but it's good for resources. But sometimes I feel like conversations get a little bit too prescriptive where, of course, we can't diagnose and support just from a social media post, but I try to be helpful when I can. I try to share resources when I can. I don't think we can really solve a lot of individual, real specific problems that way. But I mean, even in just hearing, some of our kids are really, really have very specific needs. And if I have a student with a diagnosis of CVI and motor complexity, it's going to be a little more difficult to find resources for that. So to meet their needs. So that might be a place where you go to a group and say, what do I do for this? Where do I go? What kind of webinar, what specialist or what book, what do I need to learn to be better at this?
Great. I hope everyone has listened all the way through, because I think that's a really good message, is how to use this effectively, and how to seek resources and not seek diagnosis. That's fantastic. Rachel, I'm really thankful that you joined us today. I really appreciate it. Again, we're joined by Rachel Langley, Midwest Rachel, as we will. You can find her easily on Facebook, and of course, she's made a ton of materials for Practical AAC. All of us, Chris accepted because he was going to a big conference, also did AAC in the Cloud yesterday, so you can check that out. Don't watch mine. And once again, thanks so much. I'm so glad to be here. So this has been Lucas Stuber, joined by Rachel Madel, Chris Begay, and Rachel Langley. Make sure, if you enjoyed the show, to check us out on iTunes. Leave us a review. That helps other people to find us, which is the whole point. And also check out Talking with Tech on Facebook. We'd love to field your questions there. Feel free to post anything, and we'll be happy to pass it along to Rachel as well. So once again, for Talking with Tech, this is Lucas Stuber. Talk to you all next week.